We all work for missions, and missions expect a certain integrity. We as a society have become very reliant on West Coast, Silicon Valley solutions for every aspect of our life.
I would love open source 2.0 to become a term next year.
So I do think 2026 is going to be the year of the fabrics, the data clouds, the bigger data solution. Grant yourself some space for some left field thinking, because is it so left field? Just go out and do. It's amazing what you can learn.
So, welcome back. We talked all about 2025. Hopefully, you've had a chance to have a break. You're listening to this between courses of your Christmas lunch, or perhaps this is after the Christmas present opening, but before you're having your lunch. So, this is now part 2. This is 2026. What can we expect to happen? And welcome back, Kevin. Great to have you back on again.
Hi, Stuart. Great to be back.
So now, if we then look forwards to 2026, and this is the bit which I've been dreading because I know I'll listen to this podcast in a year from now and I'll go, my God, this was like the guy who predicted flying cars and hoverboards, and we didn't get any of that right. But typically, when I say this, just about every prediction that you see all about the future, it's not that the predictions are wrong, it's just that they get the timelines wrong. So what I'm going to caveat everything we're going to say with here is this is what we think we can look forward to in 2026, but it might be 2027 or 2028 or even 2030 because timelines are always notoriously difficult to judge. So let's maybe have a little bit of a think then. What do we think? A good way to structure this would be to think about, okay, what do we know is happening in the wider world next year? What are the things that are definitely happening? What's going on in the broader social political environment? What's happening in the world of technology? What's happening in the world of the tools that we use within organizations? And therefore, based on that, what can we expect for charities and what should CEOs and CTOs be doing to prepare for that? So if you're okay with that, Kevin, should we have a bit of a go
let's
at
go.
what do we see happening next year? And I'm going to kick off with just the easy ones because this is my privilege as the podcast host. I get to tick off the easy ones. So we know that there will be some elections locked in next year. We know that we've got our UK elections all around. In May, we have the local elections. We also have the Senate elections in Wales, and we also have the Scottish parliamentary elections. We know that there's a rise of reform, and so this will shift some agendas there. We also know that there's the midterms in the US later on in the year, which also will drive a whole load of things. And there's various other elections going on in the year. I will say at this moment in time, I am not a political commentator. I am a tech and charity AI expert, but definitely not a political commentator. So I'm not going to verge too much into talking about what I think are the rights and wrongs in politics. But we know that those things are happening and they will have some influence. Before we move on from those political things, Kevin, do you have any views on what that might actually drive in terms of shifts we might see?
No, and similar to you, we're not. I'm not a political commentator, and it's interesting actually because I've been talking to a couple of CEOs who always have a view around likely policy, likely service delivery of what that means for their charities and their organisations, and then also sources of funding, and the large conclusion. And these are CEOs that have been in post for a decade or best part of over that, who have said that whoever's in power didn't really make much difference, really, which is quite an interesting commentary that I've heard from them. I would have thought that would be very different in the charity sector, but I do think it's going to matter, these decisions in terms of policy and how that plays in, because how much of the technology agenda is becoming politicized, so to speak, and particularly around the AI piece. I mean, we can't ignore here in the UK the fact of some of the large, just looking back again, 2025, some of the large investment plays that have been made by the likes of Microsoft and Google in the UK over the course of the last year, and actually what that might mean as it plays out over the course of the year, particularly in the charity sector. I think we used to engage with like tech for social impact, and now on the Microsoft side, we're looking at sort of Microsoft Elevate and how that agenda now settles down now that they've moved and changed that. and what that might mean for us. We're heavily reliant on those discounts and advantages and upskilling training and things that we get from those larger organizations.
So for those of the who are outside of the tech sector, they might not understand what was TSI moving to Elevate. What was that all about?
The kind of bodies that face off to charities within these large tech organizations. We used to have an organization called Tech for Social Impact on the Microsoft side that were our sort of first port of call, really, for everything that we needed. There's been some changes in terms of the organizational structures. It's not only a Microsoft thing; it's also happened at other large tech operators. And Microsoft Elevate is now more with a larger kind of agenda around sort of AI, the kind of contribution, which is part of Microsoft's agenda to contribute to humanity. But these are new organizational structures. They're finding their feet. And what they'll deliver on will significantly matter in terms of what benefit we can get in the charity sector.
And I think one thing that I spotted about Elevate, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but my understanding is that with Tech for Social Impact, they were solely focused on the charity sector, not for profits, and that was all around philanthropy. And whereas the Microsoft Elevate, we've shifted now to bringing in other sectors like higher education is definitely in there. So
100%. Yeah, there's been a bit of an amalgamation actually of the audiences that it faces off. So it does create a different engagement path for us. So yeah, apologies, I should have said that as well.
no, that's
Mm,
that's okay.
mm,
It's hard
mm,
to get your head around all these changes.
mm.
So, rewinding back to what so before I interrupted you there, I just want to go back to your comment all about how your CEOs say nothing changes depending on different governments. I'm paraphrasing a bit there, but one of the things that I do think changed last year was we saw in the US we had the Trump administration coming in, and we had a variety of things happening in the UK. But the result of that was international development got squeezed very significantly. There was a very big thing that happened last year where charities then suddenly found that USAID was withdrawing funding, and then there was various matched funding and various other things which then shrunk as a result of that. And that had a pretty big impact on our sector, I thought. And so that's, again, one of the things that I've got in the back of my head as I'm thinking forward to what's happening politically and how does it relate to our sector is if we have parties that are less focused on certain types of philanthropy, charitable giving, and it works in different ways, that might result in investments changing within our sector.
100%. And also, you prompted me and reminded me of a few quite important events that might have implications kind of going forward. We, just as a society, have become very reliant on West Coast Silicon Valley solutions for every aspect of our life. So, if you think about ordering your goods on Amazon or, your email or, how big WhatsApp might be as part of your life or organizing your social calendar. We're hugely reliant on these solutions and they've been great in many cases, but there are many charities, as well as corporate organizations that are thinking, actually, do we want that kind of exposure and level of reliance? And actually, there have been some events over the course of 2025 which have created a real discomfort and almost a country way of how these technologies become associated with particular countries and particular political administrations as well. So I think that will be really fascinating how that plays out over the course of 26 and beyond. Will, for example, UK-based charities think more around UK and European solutions rather than some of the other solutions to diversify their technology estates? I know some charities are thinking about that. The pragmatics of actually implementing on that's pretty tough, right? And in a cost-constrained environment, it's equally tough. So again, this is where the agendas overlap.
I think that's a really important trend to watch out for in 2026. Earlier on this year, I was in China, and it was only when I was there that it really was brought home to me that there is a whole separate set of there's a Chinese internet. Now we know this, but actually, it's only when you actually experience it that you realize, okay, there's a whole different set of tools, applications, um, social media, everything is different there. And it didn't necessarily make me realize that things are different in China, but what it made me realize is how within Europe we are using so many of our tools we use, everything we use is a US led company. There's so many different things from our operating systems to our AI systems to our applications to our tools, everything. So it's so much of that. And when we are close, we feel like we're all a unit working together. People are pretty comfortable with that. But if we did see that the Atlantic started to widen, there's a question about how comfortable consumers within Europe will continue to feel about that, or if they might feel that they more want to shift to a Chinese model where we have our own set of tools, applications, and things like more. So this is very much around sovereign technology. Do we want to go in that direction? And I think within the world of charities, I know that definitely there's been some discussions this year about trying to move away from that. As you say, good luck with that. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do because it's not something that we can go off and start using our own tools because quite frankly, the tools we'll be using will not be as good. But if we start to see increasing investment in areas like that, we might start to see an emerging set of tools from within Europe that are comparable to other tools that are out there. There might be some emerging tools, and we might start to see a shift.
What I would say as a conclusion to that really quickly is 2026, might that be the year of open source tools? Might we have that sort of rough back into kind of open source solutions, and actually some of those things becoming more and more credible given sort of the backdrop of what we've seen in the last few years. So one to be watching out for over the course of the year.
I would love open source 2.0 to become a term next year. I would love that. Open source. So ever since my earliest days in the charity sector, I thought we could be embracing open source so much more. And so I'd love for 2026 to be the year of open source. I think in my predictions for the future, maybe that's going to be 2030 or something like that. But you never know. What else? We've talked a little bit about political things there. Are there any regulatory things, any things which we know are locked in are definitely going to happen?
We've done really well not to say the words AI at this stage, which I think you've done really well for me because that's
I've
normally
been
the
trying
first thing.
really hard. My kids
Um,
tell me I have to stop talking
y-
about it so much.
yeah, I mean, it is hard to ignore, and in terms of what it means, but how prevalent it is across the entire stack of what we use. I mean, when I reflect on it of what it's going to have, I mean, you mentioned regulatory and compliance. Okay, so 2026, we've got the EU AI Act due, I think, in August of 26 as well, and that position, I think that we'll have to sort of enact that. It'll be really interesting to see how that's applied for UK charities in the sense of the sort of fundraising or the sort of service delivery of what we do. Also, just the refresh of sort of GDPR legislation is due next year, and our translation of it as well from a UK perspective as well. And weirdly, most people talk about this being a stricter regime, particularly around sort of AI or different things coming in. I actually see it's sort of a stricter regime and a looser regime, like we were talking earlier on around soft opt-in, soft opt-out rules for fundraising, and other aspects around sort of cookies and cookie management and lots of other legislative maneuvers for next year. So I think it's quite a complicated. It's not easy to sort of summarise what might happen, but it's something that UK charities are going to have to navigate in and around that. I think also the sort of charity SORP is changing as well next year, so SORP. And this is, so our sort of standard operating procedures and the regulation. I think the onus on a charity to show really transparently and clearly not only what it's doing but why it's doing it and its theory of change. I think that's going to become a lot more demanding and probably data hungry, and data is a subject that I will want to talk about in a minute. But that puts a whole load of demands, I think, on a charity and therefore the technologists as well within the charity who are supporting those people that are producing those reports. It's just greater demand in simple terms.
What other things then? So
I
yeah,
mentioned
go on.
data.
Go into
Um,
data.
I know it's a bit cliche, but you can't really have AI without good data, good data management, and those pieces. What I've observed as well in 2025 is particularly, you mentioned sort of digital data and technology, and particularly around digital estates, because as charities, we're trying to meet our beneficiaries and service users in the places that they're at. It's meant that there's this vast smorgasbord of technology solutions where we're meeting our constituents. So if you think about, I don't know, social media or payment platforms, or if you think about agencies that might be working for us, or if you think about contact center technologies, all of a sudden you start realizing that there's probably about, even the small charities have got about 50 to 100 different applications where they're engaging as an interaction with their stakeholders. And it's hard because there's no one person in an organization that understands the data that's being collected, what we're doing, there, how we're engaging with it. And we actually have to kind of conform it and bring it into some sort of central thing. Now, I spend a lot of time with the Microsofts and the Salesforces of this world, and they have some solutions for that. So Microsoft have, a lot of charities have got this already, but Microsoft Fabric as the kind of all singing, all dancing kind of central vehicle from a data perspective, but with a Copilot lens so that you can interact with that data in a very sort of natural query language way, or even sort of Salesforce with their data cloud offering. And there are other Google, Amazon, other offerings as well that we should talk about, that conform and bring this vast data collection, this vast amount of information that we've got, and try and I think the agenda of thinking around data as being a real strategic asset for your organization. Unfortunately, you now need the machinery that's going to bring all that stuff together, and the skills and the capabilities. So I do think 2026 is going to be the year of the fabrics, the data clouds, the big sort of data solutions and the advantages that we get out there. So, particularly in, I don't know, in fundraising and engagement terms, that you can give those hyper personalized experiences, you're able to sort of segment and really understand your audiences. I think there's going to be a real shift over the course of next year, and that's a bet that I'm seeing those large tech operators placing as well.
So I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. What I've seen is that for a long time that we've had distributed data around our organizations, that we've got caught up in conversations all about silos. Stacks were built up where you would have data and application layers that were separate depending on whichever team within the organization was leading on them, and that we needed to move away from that and try and bring together this idea of organizational data. And many organizations have struggled with that. But the advent of AI capabilities has now shifted everything there, I think, because it really means that if you have actually got a way to put your data into one of these platforms like Fabric or the Salesforce equivalent, being able to bring together your beneficiary data, your supporter data, your organizational data, everything to do with your customers, the people you're working with, that's now really an opportunity for an organization, because the AI you can overlay over the top of it increasingly means that you can perform all sorts of exciting analysis and get all sorts of insight, which really 2 years ago wasn't possible. But now there's the capabilities all around doing things with the data could be quite transformative. So I'm with you on that one and what we can do around data.
We haven't really talked about AI, actually. And I
Do you
keep
reckon
trying to
anything will
remember.
happen with AI next year?
No, nothing. It'll be absolutely fine. I mean, there's a couple of practical things maybe that are worth saying about AI. If I think about productivity stacks or business application stacks, and how AI is getting built into the solutions that you already know and love. So, for example, me and you at the moment are talking over a Teams chat, um, and the sort of AI integration with Copilot. And I know just over the course of this year, we've been really reliant on Teams Premium and AI capabilities to help really transform the kind of meetings and catch ups and things that we have increasingly. And I think I'm really excited about seeing group AI solutions that are being touted coming forward. So not just thinking about it on an individual basis for the, I don't know, the individual sort of chat GPT usage that we all kind of instinctively rely on, but AI as a team. And I think, I spent a little bit of time publishing my first Copilot agent on Copilot Studio a couple of weeks ago, going through sort of upskilling through different Microsoft programs. And it's agentic AI, the power that it might bring to us. It's really forcing this massive reimagination of how we work. I know for myself, I've relied very heavily on things like the analyst agent or the research agent or the project manager agent or the other agents that are out there that are pre-templated, and actually getting them configured and getting them up and running is really, I think next year is a year where you're going to see so many agents just popping up across the suite because they're inherent and inbuilt into the productivity apps that we've got.
Something I would say, so I've seen that shift. So I was working on a piece of work in the last couple of weeks, and as a consultant, it's quite interesting the capability you can take advantage of. So doing some work, being very open, saying look, this work involves the use of AI tools, but the resulting output was something which even I was quite shocked the level of output I could get in a small amount of time. And so one of the people I was working with remarked that in their consultancy days from 10 or 20 years ago, the type of output that I was able to create using AI in a couple of days, they would have charged maybe £200,000 for that as a consultancy output because it would have been months worth of work because they would have had to have large teams to do it. But now, as an individual, the capability you have just by using tools of doing large amounts of work in a short period of time that you can have the capability. I almost felt like I was overusing my license because I was like, well, just a sec. I've just been getting it to do hundreds of queries. I've been using writing myself agents and doing all sorts of things, which have enabled me to act like a team of 50 people rather than a one person, one man band. And it's quite astonishing the change you can see there. And I think that's something that even if you think about the internal improvements in efficiency that we can see with AI, which are sometimes quite slow to because you've got people in roles and people and the structures within companies. But if you think of the use of external consultants and people who perhaps don't have these constraints, that they can do so much more than they were able to do. So if you're just buying 2 or 3 days of someone's time, what they're able to do now is way more than what they could do 2 years ago, simply because of the use of those tools. And I found that in my own personal work just quite astounding, actually, the increase in productivity which you can achieve.
I think there's definitely the shift from the Mr. Clippy on, steroids, as we used to call it, of, a chatbot that I meet on a website that tells me a few things, to some capability operating on my needs and allowing me to really kind of interrogate sort of deeply into the charity. So I think there is some potential shift there. I think we should temper it because, prior to coming into this call, we were just talking about some events that have occurred this week in terms of, we're just noticing like Oracle's share price over the course of this week, and some events that are suggesting a potential AI bubble bursting, that is quite interesting. So I think the real use is a balancing maybe year for AI as well, in terms of, yes, new agentic AI capability, but really the use cases that are going to be most important to the organization really embedding in, and a lot of prototypes being abandoned.
This so the big AI crash. For all I know, by the time this goes out, everyone might be chuckling away to themselves, thinking it's already happened. But the big AI crash, is it going to happen?
I mean, surely they would be me and you would be getting paid a lot more than we're getting if we're forecasting that.
Oh,
It's
you didn't take my bait there, Kevin. I was hoping I could get you to predict a date and then be able to either tell everyone we got it right. But yeah, so I mean, I think everyone thinks there will be some sort of crash or market correction or something going on because simply because of we talked about the circular investment, all the different things that are going on there. We think that everyone's realised that this is overinflated, that there's a huge amount of capability out there with terms of what AI can do, but the ability of the world to keep up with it and to adopt these tools, the ability to get it right in terms of how much will it actually return in revenue versus how much is being invested. All of those things mean that inevitably we've probably gone a bit too far, and it's need to going to come back, and it's just a question of how much will that correction be? Will it be a massive correction? What would be the impact of that?
I think that there is some refactoring that will happen. I think maybe if we think about it more locally around the technology teams and the groups of audiences that might be listening to this, it's here. It's likely to stay. It's got a particular capability. I mean, my reflection on publishing agents recently is how many safeguards many of these solutions have been built in. It's really encouraging to see that they ask for people to consult with local technology teams if you want to go further on sort of publishing and doing things with the agents. So they've built in some really good safeguards, but that puts an enormous pressure on your IT administrators to understanding the technology and what they've got. I've actually been with one particular charity where they didn't realize that the kind of Copilot studio was on and available. And this was obviously like, configuration management changes that are being made because of the evergreen nature of their Microsoft estate that is constantly being updated. So I think really, from a perspective of technologists, there is still this challenge around upskilling and getting over it. And I think in 2026, the quicker that you understand those key mission use cases, often in fundraising or impact reporting, the quicker that you get to that, building those first sets of agents and practicing it yourself. And then the quicker that you understand how those workflows will come into your existing suite, maybe tools that you've already got, and then how you'll scale on that is the better. I don't think it's going away. I think it's definitely on the to-do list.
Okay, not going away. So I'm jumping around here, but since we got into financial crash there, it just sort of took me to the black swan events of 2026. So just quickly, just a small sort of step to the side, because it's worth always mentioning those black swan events to see what do we think any of them are going to send us sideways. So we potential financial crash. I'm going to chuck in another black swan event. I know a breakthrough all around AGI. So we had the big 2022 was the big ChatGPT breakthrough. What if we get to that breakthrough where we believe that we have actually surpassed human intelligence, that basically we're at that point where we don't have a new Turing test, but the sort of AGI test where some sort of intelligence can surpass that of Nobel Prize winners in all fields and can outperform humans on all levels. Various predictions on when that could or will happen or may not happen. If we were to reach that breakthrough, do you think it's likely we'll reach a breakthrough like that in the near future?
I mean, crumbs, this is hugely philosophical, but I wonder whether I think there's been some commentary to say that we're already there in terms of some of the supercomputers. I mean, there are some predictions that are made around things like quantum computing. And I remember looking at quantum computing back in the for-profit sector 15 years ago. And people sort of saying, look, 2026 is the year where it gets more mainstream. And it's pretty hard a lot of this is about, just power challenges and having the right kind of supercomputers that can like process the qubits that quantum demands.
And then my final one was the one we talked about earlier around, well, around cyber attacks and around AI as well. I'm wondering if we will get some big incident somewhere at the intersection of either AI mistakes or cyber. This is basically, is it a malicious actor or is it simply incompetence? Will there be some incident that's at the confluence of AI and cyber or something like that, which is so big it causes a huge pause in investment to make people think twice?
The interesting development I would think might be on the radar for 2026 in the cybersecurity area. I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about regulatory changes and data protection changes and things earlier on. I think as AI-driven attacks become more prevalent, there's a really interesting development around security automation and actually, how we imagined our SOC, the sort of security operations center and individuals and analysts that we had in the past that were sort of protecting us at the forefront of whether we've now got a series of agents at the perimeter that are keeping us safe, and how does that sort of security model, how would that work, right? How would we make sure that, when we think about the kind of conditional access permissions or the sort of security that you might need in these agents and how we'd have to sort of load them up to kind of defend us at the front line. I used to carry a title in previous charities I worked at as the head of the non-human workforce. That used to be a sort of novel joke title in the past, but I can't help feeling in 2026, yeah, my agent augmented workforce really being a thing. That my staff base is, yes, my individuals, and yes, a set of, imagine drones or whatever that I'm going to have to manage as much as I manage in terms of my human workforce over the course of the year.
I like that, and I was about to make a joke on all of my Black Swan events, and say, "What about alien invasion? Well, how likely is that?" But no, I said all of that because Black Swan events, obviously, the point of them is that they're high impact but low probability. That they're things which would really shift things and make things work in a different way. But I wanted to call them out simply to say, look, there are these things out there, but chances are that they are low probability. So don't get too caught up in worrying about what happens if we reach this point where computers are smarter than people, or what happens if there is some huge stock market crash, or what happens if there's some massive cyber incident. You have to put those things to one side and say, yeah, we'll carry on, but let's not like completely send ourselves into paralysis worrying about them and trying to predict whether they're going to happen. Um,
There's one
yeah,
interesting
go
thing I
on.
would say about forecasting and horizon scanning and what we're doing here as well. So in the past, we would look at the calendar for the year, and you'd particularly in the sort of technology space, you'd look at sort of hardware and devices and operating systems. So, some of the questions that you might, or you'd look at large, I don't know, the Apple, sort of what Apple might be doing, or what might be likely to happen at the Las Vegas or Barcelona kind of conferences, tech events, major tech events over the course of the year. And I think we're doing less of that. So, operating system, I immediately, I think crumbs. Most of the organizations I work in are very reliant on Windows. Should I be thinking crumbs? Is 2026 the year of Windows 12? Don't know. Unsure. There's rumors of it, or the second half of the year of 2026 is likely to give a bigger Windows 11 update, for example. But when I think about like devices and things like that, I mean, I know previous years I got really excited about Apple glasses, for example, at the time, and thought, wow, this is going to revolutionize everything we do and change the way we work. And those kind of announcements aren't really there. I would argue it's not like, oh, wow, there's a new Surface Pro, I don't know, from a Microsoft perspective, or there's a new Apple glasses or new hardware. But maybe actually some of the Meta products that are out there actually may go mainstream next year, right? Maybe we will be interacting with computing power in a different way. But it's interesting that those forecasts are less what I'm seeing in research and material. It's more around AI and AI bubbles and what might burst and what might not burst. And I do think that we do need a balanced focus. We do need to still be thinking about those hardware, like, for example, just as a practitioner, as a technologist, okay, you're running with probably fairly, machines that are a couple of years old. And all of a sudden now, you've got to run AI workloads on your machines. Is that the trigger for a refresh for your estate? And I think these are like quite key questions for the technology leader to be thinking about for next year. It's not just about AI, it's the consequences of AI as well.
I think that's really important. I was just reminded of, I'm trying to remember which year this was a prediction, like when we were trying to predict what was going to happen in the future, and people talked about all sorts of things to do with technology. This is probably, I'm showing my age here. This was probably from about 25 years ago, and people were talking all around the internet and everything like that. And and then one of the big things that happened was just coffee shops became really big. That it was like the explosion of coffee chains, your Starbucks and your coffee, Costa Coffee, and all of these things suddenly happened. And someone said to me, if you'd been asked a year ago what the big things were going to happen, would you have said lots and lots of coffee shops? And then we sort of all chuckled to ourselves because, of course, nobody would have said something so mundane as a huge increase of the number of places selling coffee. We would have gone for, no, it's going to be to do with the rise of online booking and auction engines and things like that on the internet. But I think it's really important to ground yourself and think about, okay, things that aren't about AI. What about devices? What about other things that might happen? Because quite often stuff like that just quietly bubbles along. We talked about quantum a little bit there, but there's also as well. I mean, there's other things that, I mean, that's not just bubbling along. That's massively growing hugely. But there's all sorts of things which could come along like that. Um, Sorry, we've gone on this future-looking section for quite a while, but are there any other things that we should be thinking about for the future for next year that we haven't touched on?
It's probably enough, isn't it?
It is. So,
It's a
um,
long list. I think
it's
that I
it's
do have a lot of empathy, not sympathy, empathy for the operators that stand in that position and have to think about all of that. It's huge. It really is.
Yes, Kevin, it really is quite huge. So I'm going to draw that to the close now on our 2026 predictions. The final part, which if you're still going on this, well done. The final part will be coming out in a few days' time, and that's going to be what you can actually do about all of this, because it's all well and good to talk about what our predictions are for 2026, what we think happened in 2025. But what's really important is now to think about what action can you take to prepare for this. So listen out for that coming in the next few days. You've been listening to an episode of Virtue and Virtuosity brought to you by VirtueChain, the AI consultancy for the charity and not-for-profit sector. Did you know that there is also a newsletter that goes with this podcast containing news on AI and tech in the charity sector alongside a podcast summary? You can check out previous copies and subscribe through the link on the VirtueChain website at virtuechain.co.uk or through LinkedIn. Check out the profile of Stuart Miskilling, that's me, for the subscribe button to the newsletter.